It's going to setting up the things for YouTube. It's going to take a couple of minutes.
Okay.
I will send you the link on the chat.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the link.
Oh.
So you can share with your friends. Also, if you want to invite them to the Zoom meeting, it's totally fine.
I already sent one of my friends the link that you shared on Facebook.
Oh, really?
But I don't know if they can join, but they said that if they cannot, they still want to watch it afterwards. So.
Oh, great.
A moment. Okay. So tell me when I should start and.
Yeah, just let's wait a couple of minutes until
great.
like more people start to join here. So also let me introduce you in a couple of minutes.
Perfect.
Hola Eduardo, buenos días.
¿Qué tal, Laida? Buenos días. Oh, Laida, it's my student. So. Kata, Laida, Kata.
Buenos días, Laida.
Buenos días, thank you. Good morning.
Oh, how it is your Spanish learning? You've been improving?
Not really.
Well, at least you were very good at survive at Mexico City. So.
Yeah, I think that survival in foreign countries is more about, I don't know, if you dare to try to speak, and maybe your the board game activity.
Oh yeah.
Your activity skills. That's
Yeah.
all you need. Next semester, I will go to Denmark for 3 months. I speak no word of Danish, and I try to at least just listen to how the language sounds, and it's like, okay, this whole language makes no sense for me. But I mean, in the research department where I go, they all speak English, and I will try to survive somehow on the screen.
Great. So I think we can start.
Okay.
So good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the lecture series organized by the International Society for Comparative Psychology. Today we have the honor to have with us the master scientist Kata Vékony. It is correct, the pronunciation?
Vékony. So
Vékony.
when you see an N and the Y together, it's like the N with a little wave in Spanish.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So sorry for that. Yeah, the little difficult pronunciation. So welcome here, and thank you for accepting our invitation. It's an honor to have us with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you can share your screen if you want it.
Yeah, I'm sharing. Can everyone see my slides right now?
Yes, we can see it.
Great.
So we are going to have first your lecture, and at the end, if somebody has some questions, we can have some time for questions and answers. So thank you, Kata. The microphone is yours.
Thank you. So as you can see, I will talk about the social behavior of dogs. That's where the title of this lecture or presentation comes from. But before that, let me introduce myself real quickly. How come that this random biologist from Hungary talk to you about the social behavior of dogs? So let's start with my educational and research background. I had my bachelor's in biology back in 2017. And I already had an experimental thesis for my bachelor's about dogs. And later I continued my master's at Eötvös Loránd University, Department of Ethology, where I'm a PhD student right now. And here I specialized in ethology or behavioral biology. I know that many places, they don't like to call it ethology. Sometimes it's behavioral biology. Sometimes they put it together with ecology, behavioral ecology, and my thesis was the continuation from my bachelor's, which was about the reward sensitivity and reward responsiveness of companion dogs. After my master's, I started my PhD. I'm a last year PhD student or PhD candidate because I'm after my comprehensive exam. And my research topic is the social dynamics of cohabiting family dogs. So I investigate multi-dog households and the relationships between the dogs and how it affects their everyday lives. And just last year in 2022, with my supervisor, we won a national research fund to further investigate this social relationship. But in this research, we included the dog-human relationships in the topic. And just as an extra, I'm about to finish my master's in teaching as a biology teacher. Other relevant activities here maybe that during my undergrad years, I worked as an animal care technician at a shelter. Later, with my longtime friends, we founded an animal rescue organization, of which I'm a board member. Our main focus is on rescues from situations where you might need special equipment or special skills. During my master's, with another longtime friend, we founded a dog school here in Hungary. During the COVID, it was a fully online dog school, and since that, we work both online and offline. Our main focus is to build everything we do on the scientific knowledge we have about the dog behavior. Also, I do a lot of science communication. I did some competitions. I was the national winner of FameLab Hungary, which is an international science communication competition based in the UK. And by the way, I'm the owner of the two dogs you can see on the pictures, Doro and Abraham. Both are rescue dogs and both are very, very, very chaotic. So let's start with social animals. Oh, yeah, table of contents, of course. So I will start with social animals and hierarchies. Then we will get closer and closer to dogs, who are the main focus of today, with wolves' social structures. Then I will talk a bit about domestication and the changes that domestication brought to dogs. Then we will talk about free-ranging dogs and later companion dogs. All these will be focusing on intraspecific relationships, so relationships with conspecifics. But after that, we will turn to dog-human relationships and then a short conclusion and questions, of course. So let's talk about social animals and social lives. Trevor said that basically every animal has a social life because they meet conspecifics at least for reproduction. Of course, this alone doesn't make a species social. But living in groups, either temporarily or permanently, is very, very common across the taxa of animals. There are a lot of benefits of group living, including protection against predation and territorial defense. Both can be done cooperatively. Also, cooperative foraging and hunting, which might allow animals to get more food than they would be able to get alone, and also increased access to suitable mates because they are right there in the group, and cooperative breeding and cooperative raising of the offspring. So these are very, very good benefits of social living, of group living. Why not every animal is doing this? Because on the other hand, there are some disadvantages too. The two main disadvantages of this are the easier spread of contagious diseases or parasites, which we as a very, very social species living in very, very dense groups know a lot about. It can also be that bigger groups can attract more predators easily. But the main point for today is the stronger competition for limited resources, which happens in groups, and it can happen more as the group size grows or the availability of resources shrink. Animal groups can be very different and variable regarding the complexity of social interactions and sociability itself of the involved group members. So while living in groups can facilitate the development of social bonds, conflicts may also arise around limited resources. So in groups of social animals, hierarchies form to minimize these conflicts, the competitive conflict, by regulating individuals' access to resources. And we usually call these hierarchies, or more widespreadly, dominance hierarchies. And here we have to stop and understand what the word dominance means. Because in human psychology, it can be regarded as a personality trait. Or in sociology, it can be regarded as an absolute trait of an individual in a group, in a society. But in the ethological sense, in biology, it only makes sense in specific social contexts. And it is a qualitative measure, one of the many qualitative measures of dyadic relationships. And it can be directly assessed based on the consistent outcomes of dyadic interactions between group members. And these interactions are around resources. These are competitive interactions, and these relationships, these dominance relationships, are the building blocks of the hierarchy we mentioned. Of course, these consistent outcomes mean that the dominant individual wins. They get the resource, they obtain the resource. But behind these consistent outcomes, there are a lot of things that can affect it, like differences in motivation, differences in life experience, even learned behaviors, differences in physical abilities, and so on and so forth. Also, while the development of rank and dominance is based on these competitive contexts, these agonistic contexts, the established rank later can be expressed outside of actual competition. Frans de Waal, who is a very, very renowned primate researcher, introduced the concept of formal dominance for these non-competitive rank displays. And it describes rank-dependent but affiliative, not agonistic, but affiliative displays and gestures between dominant and subordinate individuals in contexts such as greeting upon reunion after separation. And here, before I go further to our species today, I have to mention something. Even in biology, researchers tend to be really, really biased towards primate group structures and view all social species hierarchies through these primate tinted glasses. And this can really distort our views, as primates are famous for their great cognitive capacities, having strong foundations of the theory of mind, thinking what you're thinking, which can make them having a very unique look on their own hierarchies, just as us people can step back and look at our own relationships from a different view. It's more similar to humans than any other animal can do it. For example, it is not uncommon to a lower ranking mother to hug their offspring and higher ranking chimps' offsprings together to make their children more likely to be viewed as higher ranking. This doesn't really happen anywhere else. But this would need a sort of understanding of hierarchy and rank as a concept, which are very, very abstract concepts. And this can seem pretty obvious to our human brains, who doesn't understand what a hierarchy is. But then ask a 2-year-old or rather younger toddler about it, about these abstract concepts, and you'll get a bit closer to any other mammal's understanding of hierarchies. So I'm telling this because when we talk about dominance and hierarchies and all this jazz, we have to understand something. What happens in the animal group is most likely a set of repeated dyadic and triadic and so on interactions, which allow the animals to learn about their partners in the interactions, the specific partners, their strength, their motivations, everything I just said, and base their behavior in later interactions on what they learned. This needs no knowledge of any abstract concept. But if you look at the group structure from the outside with our researcher eye, with our human eyes, we see the hierarchy formed from these relationships. But what moves the animal is something completely different. So with that out of the way, let's get closer to our species of the day. Not dogs yet. We take a quick stop at their closest wild relative, the gray wolf. They are inarguably social. They live in groups. We call these groups packs. Describing wolf group hierarchies goes back to longer than most of the animals we research today. Maybe chickens were earlier than wolves. And we based for a long time a lot of our understanding of dogs based on these accounts, these early accounts. Too bad that these descriptions had major flaws. Don't get me wrong. The villain of every dog ethologist and even modern dog trainer story, the villain, Schenkel, he wrote down what he saw pretty accurately. The problem was that the study subject, because when you put a bunch of non-related wolves in an enclosure that is actually has the size fraction of the area this number of wolves would live together in a wild, your results will have little to no real-life applicability. So it was not really real wolf social group, the real wolf social structure, because the wolf pack, as later Mack and his colleagues discovered or described, is a family unit, a nuclear family unit. Most of the times it consists of a breeding pair and their offsprings from various seasons. So even 3 years before. And the hierarchy that we might observe in these groups is just a very natural outcome of the family structure. As you can see on this picture, I don't know if you see my mouse, it's not like that we usually see that alpha, beta, etc., omega, like a very linear hierarchy. It's more like a network of hierarchy, where the main moving thing behind the hierarchy is relatedness, is age. It's a natural outcome of the family structure. So there is no place for dominance contest, whatever that's supposed to mean, as Mac himself said, who spent 13 summers watching wolves in the wild. There are no such things. Also, really contesting for a higher rank or anything would make cooperation pretty hard, but wolves really need that cooperation. They are very highly cooperative species. They hunt for prey that is much larger than themselves, that they would not be able to really get. And also for them, as the saying goes, it needs a village, or in their case, it needs a pack to raise the offspring. Everyone takes their role in raising the youngest ones. Fighting for mates in this context also doesn't really make sense, because anyone but the breeding pair would make their very first degree relative, which is not healthy. Offsprings live between 1 and 3 years of age. They leave the group, they try to find a mate and make their own group, their own family, their own pack. In some cases, others join the pack, of course. It depends on many environmental factors. For example, how much we hunt wolves. But it's usually the sibling of one of the breeding pair, or if one of the breeding pair dies, then it's a relative, then it's a new mate. Of course, this doesn't mean that there are no conflicts in the wolf pack, and it also doesn't mean that there is no hierarchy. There is. It means that proving rank with aggressive and agonistic displays makes no sense. There are rank-specific behaviors, and the most reliable of which, from which we can really describe their hierarchy without a doubt, are submissive communicative signals towards higher ranking, so older individuals. Most of these are ritualized versions of puppy behavior. The most famous or most well-known is the licking the muzzle of the other one, the subordinate one licking the muzzle of the dominant one, which is obviously derived from the food bagging behavior of pups. So that is how the social structure of wolf packs work. But we are still not at dogs. And maybe you are getting a little impatient, or worse, you maybe think that everything I just said about wolves can be directly translated to dogs, but dogs are not wolves. There was this very unique evolutionary process that they went through that's called domestication. And yes, it is an evolutionary process. Just some of the selective forces is the need of humans. There are several definitions of what domestication is, but most of them include the three criteria you can see here. So there has to be genetic changes driven by selective processes under the influence of humans. Some say under the control of humans, some say under the influence of humans, and many definitions also include that it has to be for the benefit of humans. Most of domestication happened in during the Neolithic revolution, so 10,000–11,000 years ago, but dogs were domesticated much earlier. They are our first domesticated species, I said, and the only animal so far that received in its scientific naming the word familiaris. So they belong to us, they belong with us. It was a very successful process domesticating the dogs from the dog's point of view as well, because there are right now more than 1 billion dogs worldwide. And there are also very different dogs, the different breeds, and also different free-ranging dogs. I really love this picture. I put it here because dogs are the most diverse species we have. They are basically the cabbage of the animal kingdom. This was coined by Bryce, and I really love this. Before that, they told that cabbages are the dogs of the domesticated plants. Anyways, I cannot talk very, very much about the domestication because it would take up a whole semester worth of lecture. But there are some things we have to talk about because living in close proximity with and relying on and controlled by humans led to considerable changes in dogs compared to their ancestors and living relatives. And we have to just run through some of the changes now, and some of the changes will be clear later during this presentation. So where did dogs come from? They are very, very highly social species, but this is no surprise because their ancestor was most likely social, because most of the current members of the family Canidae are social. And all of the members of the subtribe dogs are in, the canina or wolf-like canids, are all of them social to at least a degree. And this canid sociality, as I mentioned in wolves, is based on cooperation. This made dogs, or the ancestors of dogs, for a very good candidate for domestication, because the domestication process could hijack this proneness to cooperation that was in the species already to make the interspecific cooperation we see between humans and dogs today possible. It is very hard or even impossible to talk about interdog social structure and social behavior without talking about the interspecific relationship between dogs and humans, because the latter was the one that went through the derived domestication. So the reason we have to talk about both is not because they are so similar, because they are not, but because how they affect each other. But to find how the tens of thousands of years of domestication affected dogs and their social behavior, we need a comparative approach. Luckily, we have the closest relative of dogs, the wolves, to compare with them. And also it's very likely that the common ancestor of dogs and wolves was a very, very wolf-like species. To find how much of the differences come down to ontogeny and socialization, and how much comes down to the selective processes, domestication, we have two main ways to compare. One is creating artificially similar environment for dogs or wolves. Hand rearing wolves from birth, which had been done multiple times, but it allows a very, very limited sample size and very, very limited testing time, because after 4 months of age, you cannot possibly keep a wolf as a pet dog. It's impossible. The other way is to keep dogs and wolves in a similar setting, in an enclosure. So it's not we try to make the wolves more dog-like, but the dogs more wolf-like environment. And it is also done to this day. And there is another way we can, another comparative way we can use it, because 80% of today's dogs, the dog population on the world, 80% of that 1 billion dogs are free-ranging dogs. So now we can compare dogs living with humans to dogs living somewhat independently from humans. And I say somewhat because these free-ranging dogs almost always live very near to human settlements. They are not directly controlled by humans, but it would be still a reach to say that they are completely independent. They scavenge on human trash and waste. Some people even directly feed them. They live as close to humans as most urbanized species, like rats or some birds. But as opposed to most urbanized wild species, they rarely hide from humans. They are in plain sight. But still, they are the closest thing we have to wild dogs, excluding dingoes, which is a whole other story and the debate for Australia to figure it out, not for me. So, strictly focusing on social behavior, what we see when we compare dogs to wolves or dogs to free-ranging dogs, wolves are highly cooperative with each other, just as I said. And back here, the enclosure, the dogs living in enclosures are less cooperative with each other than the wolves living in the same settings. So maybe they just lost a key aspect of canid sociality. Also, they are worse problem solvers than wolves, but that's another thing. So let's go to free-ranging dogs, because that's where we get really, really close to today's species. And of course, start with the environment in which they build their social structure, because it's a very, very, very different environment than that of wolves. And thus, the social structure is also very different than wolf pack structures. As I said, they are scavengers. They do not hunt. There is no need for coordinated hunting and high levels of hunting cooperation. The other thing is that the alloparental care, or everyone caring for the offspring, is almost completely absent in free-ranging dogs. There is only maternal care for the offspring, and it's for much shorter time than we see in wolves. As I said, wolves may stay with the pack up until 3 years of age. In free-ranging dogs, mothers only really care for the offspring for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they are on their own. But of course they can be, because they can feed themselves on the junk. Free-ranging dog families are also not the nuclear families you see in wolves. Everyone can reproduce. When a female is in heat, they will copulate with basically any male that comes. Because of these reasons, for a time, researchers thought that free-ranging dogs are not really social. They are just living next to each other, but the groups are really not held together by any cohesive forces. And the fact that sometimes the groups split up and come together again, so they have these fusion fission groups also, seem to be evidence for this, that they are not that social. They are basically an asocial species that just live in close proximity. But they were wrong, as it turned out in the late 2000s and the 2010s. It turned out that free-ranging dogs do form stable groups that defend territories together and share food, so they have this social glue between them. Hierarchies can also be observed in these groups of free-ranging dogs. They are pretty much age-graded, just like in wolves, but it has nothing to do with relatedness. And also remember what I said about this formal dominance earlier, when I talked about dominance and hierarchies. The interesting thing is, while this formal dominance, as Frans de Waal defined it, is closely related to agonistic dominance, winning competitions, or even aggressive encounters, it seems that the hierarchies they describe, at least in dogs, in free-ranging dogs, are not 100% overlapping. More importantly, while you can clearly see a linear-like, not completely linear, but linear-like hierarchy, you can describe it pretty well based on formal displays, especially formal submissions. The example I told was the licking of the muzzle of the other. In each dyad, the receiver of the formal submission is consistent. So it's pretty clear that who is the subordinate one. It's not the case with the agonistic or aggressive displays. It's more wobbly in case of agonistic rank and agonistic dominance. not every dominant display, threatening display, results in subordinance. And the receiver of aggression in a dyad is not always the same one. Although, of course, not the similar frequency, but the direction of the agonistic displays is not consistent, but the direction of formal submission is consistent in these groups of free-ranging dogs. The question is, how does it have any relevance to companion dogs? Because great, we are at least at the same species right now, but it's still a very, very different environment they live in than what companion dogs live in. And the biggest difference is, of course, the humans. So what about humans in the lives of free-ranging dogs? As I said, they live without the direct control or any close cooperation with humans. Not just that, but these free-ranging dogs are different from the usual Western European stray dog, or even I think in the US stray dog, because the stray dog, or at least their parents, had an owner once. It was thrown out by the owner or lost or anything. But in free-ranging dogs, we are talking about no human control for generations upon generations upon generations. They still see humans, they still meet humans from a very young age. And it seems that seeing humans, meeting humans, sometimes receiving food from humans is enough for free-ranging dogs to show some socio-cognitive skills that companion dogs show, but wolves can only acquire through hand-rearing and extensive training. I just drop in an example here, understanding human communicative gestures, but I will talk about it also later. But moreover, a recent study on Indian free-ranging dogs showed that they can be adopted and they can adapt to the domestic life as a family pet. So they are very, very close to our companion dogs, but still the environmental pressures, the ecological constraints that lead their lives, lead their social behavior, are normally very different, and it has been different for generations. So the question arises, okay, what about companion dogs? And I was pretty quick to get to companion dogs. I'm proud of myself. Well, as I said, that they are very, very different population of the species as compared to free-ranging dogs. Companion dogs, at least most of them, do not have to compete for food at any time, or they do not have to compete for the best, the safest, the most comfortable resting place, because these are provided by the owner. They also do not compete for mates. Their reproduction is also mostly controlled by humans, so there is no competition for mates. Actually, almost every aspect of their lives is controlled by humans, specifically the owner. So maybe there isn't really any hierarchy at all, because there is no competition. There is no competitive conflict to resolve. Research on companion dogs hierarchies is scarce, but it exists, and it shows otherwise. There are hierarchies, but there is a problem. That most empirical studies are on either very, very specific dog groups that I wouldn't 100% consider companion dogs, or temporary dog groups that do not live together with the same owner, with the same human. So kennel dogs and dogs kept in enclosures, these are the specific groups I was talking about. They form hierarchies, and it's no surprise, because living in an enclosure group or a kennel group is a bit more similar to the free-ranging dog setting. But similar hierarchies can also found in temporary groups of family dogs. Observations in a doggy daycare found hierarchy between the group. These are dogs that are usually together in the daycare, but they don't live together. Everyone goes home with their own owner. So they found hierarchy in this setting based mostly on formal submissive displays. But they found even more. In this setting of a daycare, half of the dogs didn't even interact with each other at all. There was no interaction in half of the dogs. Of those who did, so the other half, most had some sort of affiliative, friendly relationship, engaging in play fights or grooming-like behavior, like nudging the other with the snout, and all these cute things that you think of when you think about dogs. Only half of these affiliative relationships included any form of submission. When it included submission, it was consistent in direction. It could describe the hierarchy clearly. But the other half of these affiliative relationships seemed absolutely egalitarian, at least in the time of observation. They seemed that they don't have any hierarchical build-up, just egalitarian. There was a very, very small percentage of dog diets where there was no affiliative, no friendly relationship, but there was some agonistic displays. These were not always consistent in direction. So sometimes it was, now I growl at you, now you growl at me. So these results bring us even more closer to see how companion dogs groups' social structure might look like. But I think that you see what's missing in both of these cases, and especially the doggy daycare setting. Because dogs that just spend time together, walk together, be in a daycare setting, play together, it's absolutely possible to not interact. It's absolutely possible to avoid conflict situations. These groups are temporary. So what about cohabiting dogs? The thing is that most of the studies on the hierarchies of companion dogs that are actually living together use owner reports of the dog behavior. So researchers ask questions about the dog's interactions. Researchers usually use questions about very, very specific behaviors, and the questions are usually very, very clearly worded, and they use behaviors that could be ethologically valid measures of rank. So the previously mentioned muzzle licking, or outcomes of some resource-related conflicts, usually food-related conflicts that can happen in multi-dog households, even though the owner provides all the resources. So these are very clearly faced questions. We try to leave very little room for owner interpretation because the owner always has their opinion on their dogs. But these types of questionnaires usually need some observational or experimental validation. And this is the moment where I have to talk about my own recent work and ongoing work, because that's what I was just working on. It's my paper, my manuscript was recently accepted, so I'm waiting it to be published in the beginning of 2024. I used an 8-item questionnaire to measure ranks of dogs in multi-dog households, so households where there are at least 2 dogs. I think that the most dogs in a household that participated was 6. I used questions that can measure rank, of course, but also thanks to a scoring system I used, giving points for acting dominant and subtracting points for acting submissive in a context. It maybe can give us a clue on the steepness of the hierarchy or the stability of the hierarchy, but also I try to investigate 3 aspects of hierarchy and rank separately as well. the formal dominance I was talking about and formal submission, the agonistic or competition-related rank, and also leadership. Leadership was separated specifically because some free-ranging dog studies found that that leading group movement is not related to agonistic dominance that much as it's related to formal dominance, but there is still no 100% overlap. So maybe it can also be a separate aspect of rank. Then after this questionnaire was filled out by more than 1,000 owners, I invited them with pairs of dogs. So even from the 6-dog household, I always invited just 2 dogs at a time to 2 behavior tests, one competitive and one non-competitive. The competitive test was called the toy possession test, which is like the easiest test you can imagine. There were 2 types of toys, a squeaky ball and a toy that could be filled with food. And there were 6 trials. One of the toys was tossed in each trial, and the dogs could go at the same time and try to grab the toy and then keep the toy. I tested 60 dogs, and there were no dog fights during this test. I have to mention that because that's always the first question: that how many dog fights I saw. None. And there was a non-competitive test, which was a citizen science test. So the owner conducted the test at home, recorded the behavior of the dogs in the test, all following a protocol and a tutorial video I sent to the owners. The test was very, very easy for the owners, and it was extremely complex for me to assess. The task was very easy. The owner had to record the greeting between their dogs after arriving home from a walk with only one of the dogs. Well, the results of both tests show that my questionnaire measures rank reliably, but it also emphasizes something more interesting, I think. And it's that in some situations, some contexts, different aspects of rank, so these 3 aspects I was talking about, agonistic, formal, leadership, they have different weights. They have different predictive value. So maybe sometimes it can be better not to handle hierarchy and rank as a whole, but look at the formal rank, the agonistic rank, and the leadership separately if you want to understand what's going on. You might say, great, thank you, interesting and all, but why bother researching this aside from researchers' curiosity? Well, besides understanding how the animal that we usually refer to as man's best friend works, it seems that there are considerable rank-related differences in dogs' behaviors in everyday situations, so not just in competitive context, but everyday life. And these should be taken into account when working with dogs. The most notable example of this dates back to the early 2000s, when we started to understand how social learning works in dogs. I think that if you are coming from a behavioral biology side, you almost definitely heard of the V-FANS detour test. That's what I'm talking about. So the dogs can reach reward if they successfully detour around the V-FANS, which is surprisingly difficult for dogs. So what is this social learning in dogs that I'm talking about? Social learning, or more specifically in our case, observational learning, is a type of learning when an individual can learn a preference, a behavior, a new or a more effective solution to a problem by observing someone else. The someone else is usually a conspecific when we are talking about animals, but in the case of dogs, this demonstrator, this someone else, can also be a human. We found early in these social learning studies that dogs' problem-solving performance increases vastly with human demonstration, even when the human is unfamiliar. But there were still huge variability between individuals. And of course, later studies tried to really put a finger on what can be behind these differences, this variability. And one of the factors behind this variability, at least in the case of dogs from multi-dog households, is the social rank of the dog in the dog hierarchy. While dominant dogs learned next to nothing from a dog demonstrator, an unfamiliar dog demonstrator, subordinate dogs were very good at learning from another dog. But when the demonstrator was a human, while all dogs' performance increased to some degree after a demonstration, dominant dogs learned more effectively from a human demonstrator. And this is not due to some inherent difference in problem-solving skills, because without demonstration in a control group or in trials before the demonstration, there was no group difference between dominant and subordinate dogs. And this is just one thing. This is a very, of course, the defense detour is not a real life thing, but learning is a very real life thing. And knowing this might help owners, or more specifically trainers, anyone who works with dogs, to decide on specific ways to teach a dog, to use a specific method in a specific situation. Of course, there are other differences that can be linked to rank in a dog hierarchy, for example, personality, trainability, but these were found in solely questionnaire studies, but they are still interesting differences. So now we know that dogs form both affiliative relationships with each other and hierarchies with each other, both in a temporary and permanent dog group. But where do the humans in a dog life come into this picture? Because for a long time, it was widely accepted, in part based on those early wolf studies, that dogs can only live in rigid hierarchies. And in case of pet dogs, the humans in the family are part of and has to be on top of this hierarchy. And I don't really want to waste time by going back to each and every point of hierarchy formation. There are still many ways in which the human-dog relationship is asymmetric, as we possess some pretty cool features that dogs don't have, like opposable thumbs and high levels of theory of mind, thinking about what the other one is thinking, and understanding the abstract concepts that dogs don't have to understand. Also, most of the time, we have the money to buy the dog food. So yeah, this relationship is absolutely asymmetric. But is there any competition between humans and dogs for essential resources that has to be resolved by establishing and continuously re-establishing a hierarchy using agonistic displays, or basically any display from our side? Or is the asymmetry in the human-dog relationship is a natural consequence of our cohabitance? And more broadly, is all asymmetry hierarchical? I will not answer philosophical questions today. I want to talk about what we definitely know, or most definitely know, about dog-human relationships. So far, most of what I talked about might have been familiar to some biologists here with a biology background. And now I want to switch sides a bit to psychologists. If Mary Ainsworth's name rings any bell to anyone, it's no accident that I'm talking about her. She was a developmental psychologist whose main work was on attachment and attachment theory. And by attachment, here, I mean a little bit more than the everyday bonding that we use the word for, attachment. It has a very well-defined scientific framework. It's an asymmetrical relationship between a child and the caregiver. In psychology, sometimes the attachment theory is also valid for adult relationships when they are working towards a common goal. But basically, it comes from the child-caregiver relationships. So Mary Ainsworth developed the test, the so-called strange situation test, to investigate individual differences in the so-called attachment behavior complex of infants. She was looking for differences in attachment styles, but basically to this day, this is the best test to investigate attachment. So the great thing about this test is that it can really give us a view of all the elements of the attachment behavior, which I will show you on the next slide. The test consists of several episodes. There is separation from the mother. There is meeting a stranger. There are passive episodes and playing episodes. So it's very good in this. And as I said, it investigates all elements of the attachment behavior complex. And what are these elements? Well, the first and foremost is the individual recognition and preference for one individual, who is the attachment figure, in case of infants, the caregiver or the mother, over another. Another important thing is the exploration of the environment when the attachment figure is present. It's the secure base effect. It means that when the mother is there, the infant is more brave to explore the environment. Another component is stress reaction upon involuntary separation from the attachment figure and seeking to reestablish contact seeking with the attachment figure. The next one is seeking protection at the figure of attachment in perceived danger, perceived threat. This is the safe haven effect, and I think I have a typo in that word. So the safe haven effect. And the last one is the intensive and specific greeting behavior towards the figure of attachment upon reunion. So the important thing is that if you just look at an infant and the mother, you won't see this behavior complex. You have to trigger this behavior complex, or at least most of its elements, by mild stress. And the mild stress in the strange situation test is, of course, the unfamiliar place they are in, the unfamiliar human, and the separation episodes of the strange situation test. But this is for infants and caregivers. What does it have to do with dogs? Well, in 1998, a research group, which is incidentally from the department that I do my PhD at, adapted this strange situation test to dog owner diets. This adaptation was, if I remember correctly, approved by the group of Mary Ainsworth just a few years before she died. So they adapted this test to dog owner diets with very similar episodes of separation and reunion and passive and active episodes. And they found a very, very strong evidence for the whole of the attachment complex existing in dogs. Moreover, later studies showed that it's so universal that neither the age of the dog nor the breed of the dog has any effect on the attachment behavior complex. Also, later, just for the safe haven effect to have more of a threatening situation, they supplemented this with a threatening. So they supplemented this strange situation test. It was done separately, just to see if in an ambiguous or threatening scenario, the dog really seeks the owner as a safety figure. Well, some other thing I have to mention that some researchers do not like the strange situation test. In the past few years, there are more and more papers coming out where they use not the strange situation test, but the so-called secure-based test. The reasoning is that the strange situation test with these many episodes is very long. And also they worry about that the order of the episodes, because there is a fixed order when the owner is in, when the owner is out, when the stranger is in, when the stranger is out, etc., etc. That the order of the episodes might affect the behavior of dogs. And here, let me stop and tell you that the order of the episodes definitely affect the behavior, and it is designed this way because the stress level of the dog during the test is always elevating a bit throughout the test. But I digress. They do the secure-based test. The secure-based test only consists of 3 episodes. In the first episode, the dog and the owner are together in the room with toys. The owner reacts to initiation of interaction from the dog, but the owner does not initiate interaction. Then there's a separation episode when the dog is alone in the room, and then there's a reunion. This is the whole test. And the problem is that this test is only capable of testing 3 out of all the components of the attachment behavior figure: stress in separation, greeting upon reunion, and maybe exploration in the presence of the attachment figure. There is no interaction with the stranger, which is also, by the way, part of the secure base, the secure base component of the attachment behavior complex. And it's not on accident that Ainsworth used it with toddlers, because maybe they show interest towards the toys even when the mother is not around, but not the stranger. Anyway, nowadays this secure-based test is more and more popular. So we do see attachment towards the owner in dogs, and some studies even showed distinctive attachment categories similar to children's attachment styles. But why is it so unique, this dog attachment? And these are some of the reasons why it's so unique and so special. The first is that it's actually a bit of a mixture of the infant and the adult attachment. The dogs are adults. They are not infants in this test. They are adult dogs. This lasts throughout the lifetime. The attachment between the infant and the caregiver fades with time. It is interspecific. It is not the same it doesn't have the same evolutionary background as the infant-mother attachment, which is the only thing that can provide survival to the infant. And it is specific, and this interspecific aspect is very unique to dogs, because of course they ask that, maybe anyone that you socialize can form this attachment, but they did tests with wolves, hand-raised wolves, even in puppyhood. In a comparative study, hand-raised wolf puppies did not show preference towards the owner at the age of 3 to 4 months. I mean, they didn't play more with the owner than the stranger. They didn't follow the owner more than the stranger. They didn't greet the owner more intensively than the stranger. And they didn't stand by the door more when the owner was absent versus when the stranger was absent. But these are just puppies. But later the test was repeated with adult wolves multiple times, but all such tests have very, very limiting modifications to the procedure. One test had to use outside areas to test adult wolves, and also the wolf had to be stranger had to be leashed when the stranger was present, yes, for safety reasons. Another test used the familiar place instead of an unfamiliar place, and the subject had more caretakers and handlers during their raising, so there was no one specific attachment figure. But anyways, intensively socialized wolves show some aspects, some components of the attachment complex, but the relationship is considerably different that of dogs. And it's also not something that all companion animals can do, because it's not the same in cats, and it's not the same in miniature house pigs. So it seems that this interspecific attachment is very, very special to dogs. And the last is that dogs are capable of forming new attachment bonds with new humans throughout their adult lives very easily. A study showed that dogs that live in shelters start to show patterns of attachment towards a new person after a few days of 10-minute handling sessions daily, like walking the dog, petting the dog, and so on and so forth. So why do we really care about this attachment? Because it's very interesting that this is a term that describes infant-adult relationships, but the dogs are both adult, the dogs and the humans are both adults. But it really shows that how massively dogs depend on the humans. And this is the source of the asymmetry I was talking about in the dog-human relationships, and not some interspecific competitive conflict. Okay, I've been talking for a bit long, but I still have to talk about something else. Of course, the main story was attachment and dog-dog relationships, but there are some more interesting socio-cognitive abilities of dogs that specifically help dogs to navigate in the human world successfully, to communicate with their owners, to cooperate with us. And I just want to say a few words about these. First is the understanding of human communicative signals, like pointing gestures, which also a thing that might seem very obvious to us humans. But compared to wolves, wolves can only understand human pointing gestures, and only some of them, after very, very intensive training, even when the wolves were hand raised. While even free-ranging dogs have some ability to understand these pointing gestures. So they follow pointing. If you point for one of two containers, it's highly likely that the dog will follow it and try to find the reward in the pointed container. Just in, I don't know, brackets, I will say that some dogs have very, very strong spatial bias, side bias. So some of them won't follow, of course, pointing, but this is a very universal ability of dogs. The second one is the sensitivity to ostensive cues coming from humans. Ostensive cues such as eye contact and specific dog-directed speech. They have to, because they are living and many times working with humans, and it requires them to recognize when they have to pay attention to us and when they don't have to pay attention to us. But it's still interesting because I don't know of any other animal that really have this sensitivity to dog-directed or pet-directed speech as dogs have. And they are also so sensitive to this type of communication that they focus their attention so strongly on the human when we use these communicative signals that they don't even realize what's happening right before their eyes. So if I use ostensive cues while standing at one screen and then very visibly hide the treat behind the other screen, they will go to the one I talked in front of. They make mistakes because they are so focused on what we want to say and not what we are doing. They also use eye contact on us in two ways. One of these is the grabbing attention and showing behavior. We usually call it showing behavior. It's referential signaling. So they show us what they want. They show us a hidden reward. They show us something of interest to them by using their eye contact, by using gaze alteration between human and the place they are showing. The other way they use eye contact is which is usually called asking for help. When they face a problem they cannot solve, they usually start this gaze alteration between the human and the problem. And this behavior is also very unique to dogs compared to both wolves, who do not do this, and other companion animals such as cats and pet pigs. So I just briefly mentioned in the domestication section that dogs are worse problem solvers than wolves, but actually they are worse individual problem solvers than wolves. They use their social skills with humans to enhance their problem solving success. And of course, I already talked about social learning. I talked about it in relation to rank, but also it's very, very widespread in dogs. There's already a training method using their social learning and imitation abilities called do as I do, which is used in places even in training of therapy dogs and service dogs. So just to close, just to put together what we saw, because we talked about dog-dog relationships and dogs-human relationships, and as you might see that by now, these two types of relationships differ hugely, and neither of them is really comparable to that of wolf-wolf relationships. Affiliative relationships in dogs are the most common, even between dogs, not just between dogs and humans. And as we saw, in case of companion dogs, the environment alone cannot really explain the formation of hierarchies, because the formation of hierarchies, as I said, is around competition. But there is a very, very strong dependence on humans, a dependence for resources, a dependence for security, a dependence for everything. So it's just something that you might think about. It's just a hypothesis, but maybe the relationship with the owner, which the dogs are so dependent on, can be a valuable resource for dogs on its own. And it may be the resource that's really worth forming a hierarchy around, that is really worth competing for. On another closing remark, our main responsibility as humans is basically to provide these, to be the figure that they can be dependent on. And with that, oh yeah, a lot of references. Thank you for your attention. You can find our department on these links, and you can find our dog school, my project, and me as well in these socials. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kata. I think we have a lot to think about the hierarchies in dogs and to rethink again the relationship we have with dogs. And it's so cool to have like a lot of the things you think about, all the tests you are making with the dogs could be very interesting. So I think we have time for some questions here. So you can use the microphone to ask directly the question, so you can write the question directly on the chat as you feel more comfortable.
I'm just looking at the chat, and someone was asking for the resources slide.
Yeah.
I will. I'm not sure which slide, by the way.
Yeah, Carrie, if you can be a little more informative, could be helpful, please.
I think it was a few minutes ago. So, Carrie? The last slide. Oh, the references. Okay, sorry. Of course. A moment. I'm sharing the screen again. This one. There are 3 slides of references. So a moment. I will make it in big. So this is the first slide. I hope it was enough time. This is the second slide. And this is the last. I think that was 3 slides. Great.
So I have a couple of questions I want to ask you now that you've been talking about how the relationship we set with our dogs, it's important, like for the development of their own social behavior with other dogs. Do you think that um, the way that societies are set, or the way that a society behaves directly to their dogs, also impacts on how the dogs set or form their own social bonds and relationship with other dogs?
That's very interesting. It's a bit philosophical question, and I think I see where you're coming from, because dogs live very differently in Mexico than they are in Hungary.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the reason I am not 100% sure how it might be is the very recent and very vast research on Indian free-ranging dogs. There is a fantastic researcher in India, Anindita Badra, who works with free-ranging dogs, and they found so many similarities in the document relationship in free-ranging dogs as of companion dogs. Of course, not the same, but just as their latest research from this year, they found how they tried to find how dogs adopted from free-ranging dog groups can adapt to the life as a companion dog, and it was almost no difference as when I adopt a shelter dog here in Hungary, where I know that at least the parent of the dog had an owner before. I mean, I think that to find out if there's really a huge effect, a significant effect of the society as a whole, we should have comparative studies between countries and between cultures. I mean, if you want to do something like that, I'm all in. So I think that some things are very fundamental in dogs that a society, at least in a few tens of years or hundreds of years, wouldn't really change. And there's always some things that are more cultural in case of dogs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. My other question was about, like, do you want to translate your instruments to other languages? Because, like, I think it's a very useful instrument also to have more information about the social behavior of the animals, and also help to animal trainers and other professionals to work with dogs to understand more about social behavior of dogs, and to like still clear like this myth of different things and social behavior of dogs.
My original questionnaire with which I started my PhD was actually, I think, translated to at least Spanish. Okay. But after, so I couldn't really spread it in Spanish speaking communities, so then I shut down it from the website because I couldn't really get replies in Spanish. But of course, why not? I mean, you can, if you wish to, if anyone here wishes to translate it to another language, it's available on socialdogs.alta.hu. It's on my last slide, the website, and I think that, I'm not sure if the English questionnaire is at the moment up, but it will be in a few days. So if anyone, also if you have more than one dog and want to complete the questionnaires, come on.
Yeah, that will be amazing. So if people wants to be part of the research, let me check if we have some questions on YouTube.
Juan, ask in Spanish and Eduardo will translate it for me.
Yeah, if yes, Juan, you can ask in Spanish or I can try to translate in English. So don't worry about that. And yeah, we don't have any other questions on YouTube. So, sí. Well, looks like we don't have any other question. Thank you, Kata, so much for your time. Thank you for this amazing lecture.
Thank you for inviting me, and for everyone, have a very, very Merry Christmas season. Feliz Navidad in advance. And yeah, thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Oh yeah, we have a couple of questions.
Oh,
well, finally
questions.
one comes. Yeah, says, is it possible for dogs to understand the hierarchies of the family? For example, they can see the difference between the fathers and sons, or depending on who is the tutor.
Oh, that's a very, very great question. I haven't found research on this specific thing. So the multi-person household, I don't think that there is really research on this. Maybe aside from when dogs have a favorite person in the household, which of course obviously happens a lot of the times. So I cannot really answer that with very, I don't know, big confidence. But I think that dogs usually understand not necessarily the hierarchy of the family, but that one is not an adult but a child. So dogs usually behave differently with dog puppies as well, especially well-socialized dogs. And well-socialized dogs behave differently with children than with adults. So even if there is an understanding of the hierarchy, it would be very, very hard to really dismantle if it's an understanding of the family structure, or if it's just the understanding of that individual is a child.
Right. So yeah, I think that was the last question. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and have a great day for you all.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
Bye.
so happy Merry Christmas to everybody, and thank you so much for being here one more year with the International Society for Comparative Psychology. See you in another time. I hope we can follow us for the next year. So bye bye.